Welcome to Native Calgarian and Mossy for listening. I'm your host, Michelle Robinson, speaking to you in Mohkinstsis in the Blackfoot Confederacy, home of the Niitsitapi, Tsuut'ina Dene, and the Yiharhi Nakota. I talk about history, current news, unheard news, book clubs, with special guests to give local or national issues a voice through an urban Saulteaux Dene lens. My life's work will be to honor the voices of my ancestors and next generation with humor, love, and truth. Reconciliation is work, not performance. May we honor all Indigenous voices with that courage. All right. Okay. Welcome, everybody. I just want to start by acknowledging I'm on Blackfoot territory. I'm in Treaty 7 here. So I want to honor and respect always the Blackfoot Confederacy. These are their territories. So the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, and South Piikani are the Blackfeet Nation in the States. This is their traditional territory and homelands, and I'm grateful to be here. And then in Treaty 7, the Tsuut'ina Dene and the Stoney Nakoda became part of the signatories of this area. And I think it's important to always acknowledge that. And I acknowledge that in 2025, there are tons of visiting First Nations like me and Métis and Inuit that are now calling this place home as well. And yeah, just honored to be here with you all. I'm Michelle Robinson. I'm Saulteaux Dene. I'm a part of the First Nation of the Yellowknives Dene up in Yellowknife. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. And I wanted to put into the comments the guidelines so that folks who might be listening later or folks that are new know that we try to center Indigenous voices first. And I'll just quickly read through some of the stuff here, which I have handily up. I promise. I promise. So let's get this started here. We got the Accountable Spaces guidelines where people realize their privilege and be aware of potential power dynamics that might exist within a space. Share the space and time to talk. Be mindful of not talking too much or too long or repeating oneself. Avoid making assumptions about other people. Be open and critical to self-reflection. If an individual tells you that something was harmful to them, please listen. Understand that we are in a place of learning. So if you say something problematic, apologize, listen to the voices of others, learn and adjust behavior. Speak for yourself. Use I language, Michelle. Don't speak for others and don't share somebody else's story or experiences. Notice your own biases and judgments. Take care of yourself. Think of someone you trust whom you can debrief with and plan to contact them. It's okay if you need to leave at any time. Our resources I always give is communitywise.net/AROC. And books that I recommend everybody read is White Fragility and Nice Racism by Robin DiAngelo at a bare minimum, preferably more. All participants of book club are expected to hold each other accountable to the Accountable Spaces guidelines, express their views thoughtfully, courageously, courteously, respectfully, without intimidation, discrimination, harassment in all communities, whether spoken or written. Observe complete confidentiality when matters are deemed confidential. Allow Indigenous the opportunity to hold space as a priority. And just because this is a recorded session, what I like to do is let people know that at any point in time, I can pause the recording so that you can say things off the record as I try to upload these onto my podcast and onto YouTube after, so that if others are interested in learning more about the book that we discussed and why we discussed it, they can. So that way it's more accessible to folks who can't read one book in a month or, decide later to chime on in. So I appreciate everybody who is either listening through the podcast, who is watching on YouTube, or has just joined us here tonight and doesn't do any of those fun things, which I totally understand. So yeah, welcome everybody. Glad to see you. It is November 10th, the day before Remembrance Day, and 2 days after the Indigenous Remembrance Day. So that's always important. I did put on a poppy just for funsies, just to, acknowledge the time and space, but this will be recorded and uploaded not around November 11th. So When it's up, it's up. So, but it's always good to do these things as we go through this world together. So, I'm Michelle Robinson, and I'd be happy to pause the recording for anybody who would like to introduce themselves. And how about we start with Kat and Wendy, and then we'll go with Carrie if they come back.
Hello, I'm Kat. Kat Schick. I am a settler who was born on Treaty One territory in Winnipeg and have lived here off and on for 20, more than 30 years. Um, I am part of the Reconciliation Action Group and also run the Settlers Book Club. So lots of reading, lots of good reading. And I am of a white settler of British and German descent, and I'm owning that 100%. White people have a lot of work to do. So you can also join my book club where we're reading stuff about white people. Anyway, that's me. Hi, everyone.
Always grateful. Thanks, Kat. Wendy, did you want to go?
Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy Benoit. I use she and her pronouns. I am a white settler, was born here on Treaty 7, but didn't live here until most of my adult life. So grew up to the home of many nations in present-day Oklahoma, which is now home for the Muskogee, Cherokee, and Osage nations, as well as Newfoundland, which is the traditional territories of the Mi'kmaq and the Beothuk. Um, so have lived in lots of those places, but have spent most of my time here on Treaty 7 as an adult. Um, Ongoing many years of work to live up to some of my responsibilities and learnings that I have as a white settler. Really grateful for this book club to get to read, but also then reflect together. That has been a really big and important part of my journey. So thank you again, Michelle, for hosting and spending this time with us. Really glad to be here. Thanks.
I'm always grateful for all of you. So thank you. Carrie, would you like to introduce yourself at all?
Sure. Thank you. I'm Carrie, and I was going to say I'm an alcoholic. Um,
You're in recovery?
yeah.
That's okay. That's great, actually.
Oh my God, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Congratulations.
Thank you. Well, a couple years now. I just finished a meeting and then come here, and I was like, yeah. Anyway, that's the other meeting. Anyway, I am third generation settler, um, born in Treaty 7, live in Treaty 6. Sorry, do I have that backwards? I'm in Trochu, Alberta, so I believe that's Treaty 6. Anyways, um, um, I think I think it's really important for me, growing up, that I was able to notice such um, an unfairness, and I didn't know the word for it early on, and then as I got older in my early 20s, it was really important for me to be involved in all human rights and whatnot. And then my other career took over for a couple of years, and then I, sobered up in '99. Um, and so having my son, uh, 16 years ago, it was even more important, um, to make sure the least I could do is parent and raise a child, to not be another statistical white, male-centered person. Um, and Yeah, my biggest problem today is that I'm afraid to make mistakes, and I'm working on that. But I am very willing and practice anti-racism constantly, and I will never have it down ever. I know that, and yeah, every day I get to wake up and do something good in the world. So I guess that's that. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you. We appreciate you introducing yourself in that way too. Um, yeah, so geez, where do I even start here with I'm I'm just happy to see people and do something normal. It's been a while for me. Let me just say my life's been pretty upside down. So kind of back to your point, Carrie, about unlearning racism every day. I am unlearning ableism every day and with new lenses every single day, and especially within the last month. And yeah, just I don't know what to say. If we're not learning, what are we doing? I don't know. So, so yeah, for folks who don't know, my mother had a hip surgery at the start of October, and I was up in Edmonton for 3.5 weeks. And last week, my dad had triple bypass surgery, so I've been at the hospital every single day. And as soon as this book club is done, I'm going to be heading right back, picking up my stepmom and taking her back to her childhood home so that we can do it all over again tomorrow. And yeah, tomorrow's Remembrance Day, and I normally like to go to Bankhead, which is at Lake Minnewanka, because the Great War had veterans that there was a monument put up for, but because it's now in a national park and now in a town that no longer exists, nobody goes to recognize that one except me and this like Dutch guy from Camrose. So that's normally what I'd like to do. And then my friend Marilyn said, "Hey, come to my Legion." So if I can get my mom to the hospital in time and get my butt to the Legion in time, then I might do a Remembrance Day ceremony tomorrow. It's just nuts. Look, my life's nuts right now. And my daughter is in week 3 of an 8-week course for SATE. So I'm like super excited for her, but knowing too how incredibly overwhelming it is because, as you all know, high school is not the same as post-secondary. So it's a lot quick, and thankfully they have a great foundation thanks to, Jack James High School. And you know, but it's still she's the youngest in the entire class, and there's another girl. So there was 4 that we were pretty sure they split up the other 2 from these 2 for the others. So, women in trades, they said. So my daughter is doing amazing. I'm so proud of them. And then of course we're trying to figure out our mental health. That's been funsies. Holy. Darcy got a new diagnosis, thank God, which has helped him immensely understand a little more who he is. And so that's been wonderful. And yeah, anyway, that's our life's nuts right now. But once upon a time, in a galaxy far, far away, young little Michelle thought, surveying, I can do that. And so I went to SATE and I took night classes and I became a drafter for survey companies. And I don't regret it. I loved math. My daughter and I very great at math and science, so it was easy for us to do that. It's still hard and intensive, don't get me wrong. So anyway, that's what I had done, which brings us to our book of today. We try not to do non-Indigenous books very much in this because it is starkly different. A non-Indigenous centered book compared to an Indigenous centered book is so different. And this book, wow, there was some times it was just a punch to the face with racism. So I do have so much to say about this, but back to why we chose this also is one of the elders of this area, who's Blackfoot, who also has a doctorate, said to me that this is a book that everyone should read. And because it is specifically about the Canada-US border and the surveying of it, and considering the era that we're in right now, where we have a president that thinks that it's acceptable somehow to be, talking about us just joining his stupid country, and pretending like we're not a sovereign nation. I thought it was really, really important that we address that in the best way we possibly can and read this book. So, and for those who are not watching the YouTube, you can't see my wonderfully designed earrings that I have shared on multiple social media many times. And I'm super excited that so far, Mr. Trump down south has not been able to stop podcasts and recordings that we have going forward. Although any day, I just feel like any day they could be shut down. So anyway, so that's why we chose Arc of the Medicine Line. And, for me, who did take geomatics and talked about racism within geomatics, this book so nicely explains it so well. So I'm just going to get started on this. So for folks who maybe have no idea, I'm just going to read just the panel. Just the panel. This is what it says itself by their authors, Tony Rees. The border between Canada and the US was laid out in many stages over more than a century, but the biggest part of the job was the long, mostly straight across the plains, Great Plains. On September 18th, 1872, two large teams of Army surveyors, one from each country, met at the Red River on the Manitoba-Minnesota border to fix for the first time the precise location of the 49th parallel between the swampy shores of the Lake of the Woods and the continental divide of the distant Rockies. Over the next 2 years, they endured snowstorms, mosquitoes, flash floods, and the seething tensions from the aftermath of the U.S. Civil War, the Métis Uprising, and the ongoing Indian Wars, all while mapping and placing markers across nearly 900 miles of unforgiving territory. In drawing the medicine line, they defined the shape of the new nation and ended once and for all the old American dream of manifest destiny, which was really nice that he said that, which is why I wanted to read it. Now, the person who wrote this is a person who is actually a really big deal to the city of Calgary. But I'll just read it. Tony Rees was born in the United Kingdom in 1878 and came to Canada in 57. After obtaining his Master of Arts in 17th century English literature from the University of Western Ontario, he became supervisor of the City of Toronto Archives, moving west to become Calgary's first city archivist in 1981. In 1985, he joined the organizing committee for the Calgary 88 Winter Olympics, building the foundation for what would become its archival legacy and become chief archivist at the Glenbow Museum, a post he held until 1993. Rees is the author of Hope's Last Home, Travels in Milk River Country, and shortlisted for the Writers Guild of Alberta Award for Nonfiction and Polo, The Galloping Game in 2000. So, total nerd moment for Calgarians and us to talk about this. So I thought it was really important for us to digest this one. And it's actually always bothered me that we've called it the medicine line. Always. Because I'm like, what medicine? And this book kind of proved it. Because if there was one thing the British, the Canadians, and the Americans seemed to all have in common, it was the hate for Indigenous people throughout this entire book. So let's get started, folks. Um, I did read the last 40 pages is actually like conversations about the people that were in the book. And I found some of that to be incredibly interesting because these people at their time of like 1872, 1873, 1874 were respected for who they were in those days, despite them being total racist pricks who did believe in manifest destiny and had no problem being so disrespectful to Indigenous people. I wish this would have been co-authored. And honestly, this book is kind of one of the reasons why I feel like I need to go back into geomatics and be that jerk, but I don't know. Where do we even start? Okay. So, why did I? Okay. I took a whole bunch of notes and I'm realizing I didn't need to. And I took a bunch last night too. But I'm like, we don't need to go over these men. That's what I was going to do at the end. Um, but I did want to quote for some folks who were like, is it really that racist? Let me just read to you from page 57. So at this point, they were starting their work together, and as Anderson's description of his camp cook suggests, they should carry extremely heavy and unwielding loads over long distance and rough country in appalling weather. It was the kind of work that their families had been doing for decades when the fur companies were still active in the area, with horses and wagons of little use in thick bush or deep winter snow, and the rivers frozen for 6 months of the year. It was native bearers who had kept the supply lanes open between the trading centers and the isolated outposts. In addition, an additional problem with hiring the native labor also presented itself. The Indians would only work on the condition I would take care of their wives and families during their absence. 12 or 14 families accordingly arrived and set up their lodges close to the observatory camp, and an occasional issue to them of a little flour and bacon was equally divided among their numbers and used with surprising economy. After living almost entirely on moose meat and a few roots, they have an indescribable craving for flour. Anderson considered 200 pounds of flour, a little tea and sugar, a small price to pay for keeping his cutters out on the line. And so, it's just constant little digs at Indigenous throughout this entire thing. Meanwhile, they get to, do their work and not understand like settler colonialism at all. Um, and then I have a whole bunch of quotes on things like that. And I found it interesting. I throughout this book, I was just reading a quote about one of the folks who had no previous experience of working under extreme conditions and was clearly enjoying himself. I really feel like, these types of notes that were coming from the surveyor's notes were really, and their reflections in their diaries were really this, you know, myth of the untamed, you know, uncivilized country that was there. But yet, if you read through his lines of, well, the condition was if, you would take care of their family while they're gone. It's like, why is that such a foreign concept to you, settler colonizer? Like that should not be such a foreign concept to you, but it was because we had these two cultures, one who depended on each other and respected each other compared to these capitalist pigs that came from across the pond, so they have no concept of family or caring for each other at all. They just don't care about those things. So I found that very, like, that comes through very clearly, their lack of humanity, their lack of respect for communities, families, land as well. Um, anyway, I some of these notes I took, I think were more for me talking or thinking about actual surveying and actual geomatics. So like there was constant um, complaining between the Americans and the Canadians about whether it was right and who was going to double check what. And so that, and ironically, it was the states that always had to petition the government for extended money to help them do the job that was supposed to be tasked. So I found that very interesting. Um, and the like I talked a little bit about their lack of humanity. Just reading some of this stuff here, it was believed that he had walked two Indians to death, but I should require to be furnished with the full particulars of that tragedy before I ask you to believe the story. I'm like, You mean, so you know he killed two Indigenous people and there's no justice for that whatsoever. And because you don't really care about Natives enough, you know, you wouldn't believe the story anyway. Like, can you imagine our lives being so discarded like that, right? So irrelevant to these folks. And yet they're well respected. And you're seeing Mr. Trump down south, you know, acknowledging the murderers of Indigenous people still as heroes and saying as such as well, that they should never have not been given their Purple Heart or whatever it was that they were given. So anyway, so I'm just fast forwarding to 88 here. Um, Dogs were working animals rather than pets. Some were still troubled by what they saw as unnecessary cruelty of the local handlers, who they thought were too liberal in the use of the whip, while prepared, without question, to go native where such issues of transportation and clothing were concerned. Few of the British liked the local foods. Like they just have to put down natives in every capacity they possibly can throughout all of his notes. Um, and again, just for me, a lot of noticing how much they just hated each other, the British and the American. And I say British, Canadian, kind of interchangeably. They're the same people coming from the same place. So I don't know. Settler colonialism. So I found this one quote on page 90 very interesting because again there was constantly petitioning to the governments for funding for this, and especially in the States. And so Campbell's letter to Cameron arrived. It was terse to the point. The reason the Americans had withdrawn from the field was strictly as a result of their funding having been run out at the time. Campbell said that he was spending all of his time lobbying members of Congress to ensure the money for the coming season would be approved. But that was far from a sure thing, and he would greatly appreciate it, he continued, if members of the British Commission would not provide the Annexes forces in Washington who resented spending money on the survey that would be redundant when they believed Western Canada was absorbed by the United States. And I just found that, you know, this attitude has been a part of the American diaspora forever, right? And so, of course, Trump is, you know, perpetuating this, right? Um, do. Yeah, and then this letter back and forth, and they're it just goes back and forth through the entirety of this book. But well, the one thing they're united on is hating natives, it seems like. So, oh, I thought this was a really sad story because I tried to reread it to see if I could find the name of this guy. So on page 94, they were you know, struggling obviously in the winter of 72 and 73. And, you know, Anderson took a liking to an enthusiastic surveyor who was well known for taking the place of any obviously tired man among his comrades, hewing the trees as vigorously as the others. It was while Anderson was in camp, however, that a sad accident befell the party. He, Coster, and another man were some distance ahead of others as they were widening a line that had been cut the day before. He was felling a tree, and as it was tottering, he told the other man to look out, but the latter placed himself behind another tree and looked out at the one that was falling. The top of the tree unhappily struck him in the head, knocked him senseless, and obviously, eventually, he died in less than an hour. And they were going to do a wooden cross and bury him right there, but they realized he was a freeman, so he had to be, or a Freemason, so he had to be taken to Winnipeg to get his last rites and such. So they sent a dog sled to do that for him, and I was just like, you know, so for anyone who's ever been to Ottawa, the canal that they have is filled with you know, graves of people who died creating the canal. And so it was really clear to me after reading that that there were how many Indigenous people, and how many surveyors, how many workers who have died along the parallel. So it's ironic we don't know this man's name. How can we have a Mason who is obviously important to the Freemasons and not be named here? And how is it we're not like trying to honor that commitment to, settler colonialism? Because like, and it was said in here how they on the Canadian side, they honored all their surveyors all along there by naming mountains and passages and et cetera, after all of the explorers, they said, surveying. And yet on the state side, they were like, and they didn't do that for any of them. And it's like, yeah, which is like, they're not right either, but at least that was one thing they did that was kind of right. But, you can't really have a fulsome conversation about that here in Canada because right now you still have Pierre Poilievre, who's like the official leader, who's like, John A. Macdonald's the best. Anyway, so yeah, these were just things that I don't know. I could go on and throw out example after example, but I just think it was really important. The overall book shows the lack of humanity, the lack of care about Indigenous people, the lack of, you know, there's so much tension between Americans and Canadians throughout this entire book, and who's doing right, who's not doing it right. And I was just really struck by all of it, and how the Métis ended up being used by the Canadian side, by the British side, with this like garrison of Métis folks. And there was still so much underlying racism. Like I don't have it dog-eared somewhere, but like, at one point in time, some horses were stolen, and it was assumed it was the natives, and all the way to Blackfoot territory, and the Pagans and were involved, and they had to show these folks, see, there's none of your saddles, none of your horses. I don't know, we don't know what your deal is. Eat some food and go. And then so they did, but it was just that underlining assumption that natives were here to steal from us. So that's why it's important for us to give them enough flour and enough sugar and enough tea so they don't steal from us. And I was just like, you guys are terrible human beings. And the only reason why any of you are here is because the natives helped, like the original Mayflower in Plymouth, where they were eventually massacred for that as well. And I just, it is so arrogant and demeaning the way settler colonial men just exist and write in their books the way they write. It's so terrible. And use Métis, and Métis never seem to figure that out. Like I can't wrap my head around why the Métis won't say these guys fucked us over here, they fucked us over here, they were terrible to us here. We know who this Freemason is, and we're gonna name it. Like I don't understand, but that's their nation. I did like a lot of the photos that were in here, like people who were very clearly Métis. um, and the U.S. Boundary Commission under Canvas, like this had to look like what Treaty 7 looked like as well, and other things. So way back in my days when I was in geomatics, I used to scuba dive. And in Waterton is the Gertrude, an old steamboat that used to be used all the time. So it is super cool to see pictures of the Sternwheeler Dakota in Manitoba, because that was a huge part of, building Canada, building the US. But we don't talk about it enough. Ironically enough, as a sea cadet, like even for me, it's shocking. As a prairie girl, you'd think I wouldn't care about these things, but I do. So anyway, I went back to the end here, and I did just want to mention that Albany Featherston Hawk, whose name I loved so much, by the way, reading throughout this entire book. Um, he Dr. Burkess, his assistant Thomas Millman, and the leaders of the 49th Rangers basically all ignored in the great renaming of creeks, mountains, passages. Yeah, they purposely discarded that. So like if I was Métis, the 49th Rangers would be like a massive point of pride that I would be talking about as a part of Canada. And for me, as a person in geomatics, trying to tell all of the, new surveyors and such that if it wasn't for the Métis, maybe we would have been absorbed into the States. These were just kind of little things that I was purposely kind of aware of that I thought was important. And this is where I wanted to save you money, Carrie, before you go buy this book. At the very end, the University of Alberta's Peel Prairie Province database contains a bibliography of over 7,000 published works important to the history of the Canadian West, and about 4,000 of these works are freely available and fully searchable, including several stories of the Boundary Commission. Complete texts are of the U.S. official report, Peel, 859, Dawson's report 731, both Anderson and Featherston Huck's account. They have numbers for those, and it can all be accessed at peel.library.ualberta.ca. So yeah, like even if you want to get a little deeper, they did mention Hugh Dempsey on the same page in 372, um, because he's kind of the storyteller of a lot of Calgary and a lot of this area. So that was literally the only time I seen his name really mentioned here, which was really shocking to me because he was such a big part of the Glenbow as well, and writing basically our history. So, and then an acknowledgement, like he talked a lot about all of the things, like this is Calgary lore for sure. And at the very end, he talked about Donna Kinniston, um, who saved their lives. So I'm like, there's a story I'd like to hear more about. But there was, I want to say Jennifer, um, where was it? Jennifer Bros Gary Brondovitz's daughter, I thought was mentioned here. But anyway, I guess I missed it in all of my dog years. So anyway, I found that to be an incredibly important book for people to understand the nation building. Um, Geomatics is super boring unless you like math. I love math, so I love geomatics, but it's not for everybody. But really, I was really first introduced to it as a Sea Cadet. In Sea Cadets back in the early 90s, navigation included a lot of geomatics, really just on the water. And the more advanced you got into sailing, the more advanced your formulas became in navigation. And the higher you got, the bigger the ship, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those were concepts that were introduced to me as a sea cadet, let alone um, you know, just being surrounded by surveyors. My husband became a surveyor. And then when we came to Calgary, I took geomatics to be a drafter for surveying because I figured, well, that was something I could do. Because again, I'm native. I didn't, I had a false belief that I could just walk into a university, say, hey, I'm native, and they would give me a free education, because that's the settler myth that I was taught, right? I didn't know how to navigate that. So instead, I worked full time for a print company in Kensington while I, did night classes at SAIT. And that's how I became a drafter, and did that until I had my daughter. And I was considering going back into it, but um, experiencing racism at the hospital just changed the course of my life. And then understanding reconciliation has changed the course of my life. So for me, I think the only way I would go back into geomatics is if I really did look at it through a racial lens. And I've told stories about what it was like to work for surveyors, and how when my uncle passed away, it was said to me that I just can't take off to go to Yellowknife for funerals all willy-nilly, and especially if you have that many aunts and uncles, like things like that were said to me. And this was like in the 2000s. So, um, and at that time there were only four female land surveyors, like in the entire Alberta. And I had seen one part-time who was on maternity leave and would come back and work part-time. So that was the only one that was available at that time. So I don't know what has changed in 2025 per se, but and I don't know if I would go back to drafting per se, because I don't even know if you need to do that job, frankly, with AI and all the rest of it. Like I have no idea how advanced drafting has become since like there's been so much change with the internet. But ironically, when I did work for the Crown temporarily for the Alberta government, they were still using the same database that we were using in, I guess, 2007 was when I left. It's for land surveys and such. So they haven't updated the Alberta government information, but I'm sure the actual industry itself has been updated substantially. So anyway, yeah, so I have a lot to say about this book club, and but at the same time, I want to leave a lot more space for other people to talk about, whether you want to talk about geomatics, whether you want to talk about settler colonialism, the book itself, like however you want to frame that. I'd love to hear your voices. So maybe we'll go Kat, Carrie, and Wendy, and go from there, and or just reflections of what I said, etc., whatever.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for sharing your experience in geomatics too. That's really interesting to know that you were one of the few females ever to take it. I'm glad to have read this book. It was equally, I found it in equal parts fascinating and oppressive. Just knowing that this action was cementing settler colonialism on the land. And like you said, there was no Indigenous perspective on what these white guys were doing on their territories. And yeah, I mean, Canadians should read it just for that, just to know this is what happened. I was fascinated by how they actually surveyed using the stars and their instruments and stuff. That I found very interesting. But a lot of it was just, these white guys, just constant white guys and white men doing their white men things all across the land. And it just felt really invasive and condescending to Indigenous people. As you mentioned, the way they talked about them, just so British. So sorry about that on behalf of my ancestors. We were dicks, I know. And I wanted to say something else, but I can't remember now. No women. The only time they talked about women was, writing home to my mother or my sister. It's like, where are the women? No woman was involved in any of this activity, which probably maybe was a good thing, but in the 1800s they were all oppressed anyway too, so would have been a little bit more challenging. But yeah, there were interesting things about it, to see how untamed the land was until these guys showed up and tried to tame it with their little boundary markers and stuff. I'm glad they got eaten by mosquitoes and bugs so much. The cold really wrecked them and everything. But it was all like, yes, we're doing it. We're slugging through this nature and we're taming it and naming everything after themselves. It was gross. But yeah, I really appreciated the opportunity to read it. I didn't finish it completely, but yeah, thank you for putting it on the list.
Again, just going to reemphasize, you don't always have to finish a book.
I know. Yeah.
Like, and I gotta say that I know that's a really controversial thing to say in a book club, but the truth is, like, you all know it. Some books are just like, I can't read another page of this. This is stupid. And so, like, even for me, the last 200 pages, I was flipping through it, like, what's really relevant here? Because the first 200 kind of lay out the like
Mhm.
emotional like dysregulation of these men
Yeah.
just having big baby fits with letters to each other in their countries. Like I'm like, you guys are babies. Like this is ridiculous. And I don't mean like I know that's even an insult to children, and I don't want to do that. Jesus. So yeah, it just reading this is so ridiculous. So I never want anyone to feel, guilty for coming and not reading a book or not finishing a book, because especially in this case, like it's just
It was a
it
slog.
it's
It was a
right.
slog.
Right? And it's just so dehumanizing. Like, yeah, those natives were found later frozen
Mhm.
under a pile of bison skin. I'm
Yeah.
like, those are human lives cost for your fucking ego.
Yeah.
You
And there was
fucking asshole.
the section where Dawson would talk about digging in Indigenous graves, looking for stuff. And it's like,
Right?
what the fuck are
Right?
you doing?
Yeah, just all willy-nilly. Here was a
Yeah.
human skull.
Yeah. I was just like, what? How disrespectful.
I know, it was really
Anyway.
bad. And like that's throughout the entire book.
Mhm.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I was going to. And I was going to bring up something. Remind me to talk about toboggan, the word toboggan, after we're done this. We're going to come back to toboggan, but I'll let you continue. Sorry, Kat.
No, I'm done. I'm done.
Okay, great. Carrie, I don't know if you kind of overheard some of the things that we were talking about, if you have anything you'd like to chime in on that.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm really glad I really appreciate you saying a lot about that book, so I don't have to buy it. I'd be really curious why the elder recommended that book to you personally or to someone.
Well,
Just
I,
because,
I think it's for a lot of reasons. And I think
yeah,
I've read lots of surveyors' notes and surveyors like history, like almost all of the great explorers of Western Canada books are almost always like surveyors' notes.
yeah,
And I've
like the Great
always found them
Explorer.
incredibly demeaning, right? The way they
Yeah,
write of us and they write of
yeah.
the land and all of that, like they're so demeaning. And so I
Mm.
just found this really interesting that because like if you have that lens, if you're native, you're going to see that throughout this entire thing.
Yeah,
But and the hope is that like enough settlers have done enough anti-racism work so that they know this is like top 10 tier level settler colonial
yeah.
anti-indigenous hate, right? And
That's
so
why I was sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, so I think it is important that in non-indigenous understand this is how your country was even built,
Yeah,
from my point
totally
of view.
agree.
Yeah.
It baffles me to no end talking to a supposed human being who doesn't get it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I remind myself, I need to do this work because those are my people, and I can't sit here going, well, I don't claim you,
Yeah.
because that again would be causing harm on other people,
Yeah.
especially brown indigenous people.
Yeah.
So, fuck.
Yeah. Well,
I
and like
gotta stay there
so
and all
many
that. Ugh.
people have articulated it so well until we dismantle the systems. Like the genocide
No,
continues. And
there's no
I want
fixing.
this genocide to stop. I know I'm crazy.
Oh yeah, you're so crazy. I mean, there's no fixing the system because it never started to work.
No.
And like it was never invented to work. It was like, in place because it served a set few white fat colonizers. And that's all. So, I mean, the reason I ask about what any elders that I've had the privilege of speaking with have always had that beautiful underlining way of, I don't know, how do I even they have this, there's more reasons and more reasons why they tell me to do XYZ.
Yeah, well, and
So
I think
I
that's why.
wonder,
Like it's
yeah,
a push for you, it's a push for anyone
yeah.
listening or watching the
But I would have thought, and maybe, I don't know. I just thought maybe that's a book for maybe a new person who doesn't quite get the disproportionate thing. Like you don't notice the disproportionateness here. Like this is Canada, you're Canadian. That doesn't do it for you. Okay, read this book, maybe. I don't know. Like, wow. Like,
yeah.
I know I'm thick. I didn't realize how fucking thick they really are.
Yeah. Well, and that's why we try to dissect them with an Indigenous lens here, right? Because
Yeah,
like if you were to throw this book at like a group of newcomers, they would just be like, "Oh my God, it's so great that the British came in and helped civilize this world," because they don't have that lens, right? They're so
yeah,
sweet and naive and think the police are going to help them and all sorts of other
yeah.
myths they've been taught. So, that bigger picture of importance of going
Yeah.
through like the history in some capacity with that indigenous lens, that anti-racism lens, in the hopes that we do better, right? Because like here's a crazy thing for today. To just this is today. Okay, so three things. It is the anniversary of the Edmund Fitzgerald. So as a Sea Cadet, I obviously care about that. I think all Canadians care about that, and maybe even a few folks in Michigan might care. But at the end of the day, those sailors passed, and I was reading that in Michigan at a place they were supposed to go to, the church bells rang 49 times for all the souls that were lost on that ship for today. So first, let's honor that. And then there were two other things I was going to bring up about today in history. Oh, so quietly in the States, they took down all of the plaques to acknowledge the Black veterans that they had done that work in the last 5 years for. They quietly took that down and took that off of all of their websites, plaques, everything, because we can't acknowledge that. But ironically, here in Canada, so just now, today, we are starting to acknowledge the Canadian Japanese that fought in the Great War for Canada and yet have never been recognized. Not World War II. No, 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 no. Just we're just gonna focus on the Great War right now. So, like it's just a weird day for me for like when you think about history and how today hits in so many different ways. And I just find it incredible when we talk about Confederation, we talk about nation building. We've never talked about the sacrifices of the Indigenous people, the Métis, that built just the survey of that one piece, because I know what has gone into the other parts of Canada because I had to take that through SAIT, and that is an important story too that we never acknowledge in any capacity, either. So anyway, I could go on, but I just think it's important that it's just so weird to me what we decide what we're going to honor and what we decide we're not going to honor. It's just insane to me, actually. So I think if there's anyone listening who is like, what can I do when I grow up? Literally, if you just looked at surveying and the history of how many people have died in order for surveying to exist, that would be amazing to see, and not exclude Indigenous people, please. That would be amazing. That would even be better, actually. So anyway, Wendy, would you like to chime in any capacity, like reflection or just, your thoughts on the book, etc.?
Thanks so much. We've touched on a few of the things already. Starting with, thank you just for naming out loud that if we don't make it to the end, it's okay. Because I did not make it to the end, and I feel like you were reading my mind when you were talking about how far you get in a book, because I'm somewhere in the middle of spring of 1873, and I was like, this is all the same and I am not learning a lot right now. And so I did start the journey of skimming. Started skimming. It's the same continued story. So I appreciate us talking about it. It's allowed me to earmark a few pages on pages I haven't actually gotten to. I'll chip away at it, but I also really agree. Like it really stood out for me. It's so um meaningful that it is night and day, whether it is centered on a non-Indigenous perspective or an Indigenous perspective. Like it's very different perspectives. And yeah, so we've already gotten to that part. I think um I was kind of interested at the point where they were talking about Fort Francis and Rainy Lake, mostly because 2 years ago, my family and I we drove from Calgary to Newfoundland and back, um, and we stayed near Fort Francis, and we stayed right near Rainy Lake, and it was actually one of our favorite experiences. Like we just happened to have a good family night that night, and it just I had all these memories of that particular location. It's a fascinating location because you can literally like the US is like right there on the other side of the water. So that was probably the most vivid part for me because I had actually been in that place and witnessed it in a way where I could visualize what they were talking about. But it was kind of disappointing in the sense that like their squabbles are so not interesting. Like they're fighting over stuff, and I'm like, I just don't care. Like I just don't care that you're like, this is however many meters this direction, and you use whatever instrument and blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, are you serious? This is the most upsetting part to you. Anyway, I found that all very interesting. I found it interesting that even in light of everything you've already said, like you've already named it so well, how the non-Indigenous perspective is loud and clear, which means they're very dismissive of the value and the relationship they have to Indigenous people. But in that particular location, like when they were at Rainy Lake and they were having so much trouble identifying a marker, it was actually an Indigenous person, an Indigenous elder who helped them actually figure it out. And I'm just like, it is it is kind of mind blowing. And then there were a couple other like peppered in moments where they would make reference to an Indigenous community that meant survival continued and then they carried on. So I'm just like, how do they circle that square? Like, anyway, it's fascinating and frustrating. And to our point about the women part, I thought that was super interesting too, because, and again, I really only read the first third of the book, so that's where my comments focus. But I noticed at the beginning, they start out right away not super keen on Cameron, and one of their reasons is that he was so focused on his family's needs. And he was like dealing with his wife and child and therefore wasn't able to kind of keep up. Like they would make these offhand like digs at him that often related to his relationship to his family, which gels with just their whole like absence of caring about people and family and community and all of those things. And so I'm just like, oh, it's so telling. And then I think that leads me to, again, what you've already named this part, but I really do think this is not the kind of book that someone who's not already been thinking about our relationship could handle, because this is the way they think about it. Absolutely the way they think about it. And so it would be an important book to read and reflect, like to choose that chance to reflect rather than just read flat out. I actually don't think very many people would get through it. It is not an easy read. It is not very exciting. Their squabbles are really, I don't know, it just doesn't keep you reading. So that's a
No, and what
challenge.
would the
Like,
offhand, oh, and this native died this way. I'm like,
I know.
what? Like out of the whole book, the only interesting things that are in here, you're just so nonchalant about life in general, or there's livestock, or
Yeah.
like they just did not care about the animals either, other than it was a burden to feed them and to keep like I'm like, this is insane. You guys are like, what is wrong? How inhuman are you?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's like loud and clear in this one, for sure. Um, and definitely left me with questions about um, mm, well, I guess that line was drawn. I'm still trying to understand the medicine. You mentioned this earlier, why is it called the medicine line? I'm still trying to understand that. So I don't fully understand that. But yeah, it was not my favorite read, but it was a reminder of where Canada is. I know, oh, and I know one more thought I had. But it's kind of in a different vein of thinking. So maybe I'll just stop there and see where everybody else wants to go with it before
Okay,
I
but
go
we'll
with that
come
thought.
back to that. So
Yeah.
let's do two things, the
Okay.
toboggan thing and the
Yeah.
medicine line thing.
Yeah.
So I actually really truly believe after reading through all of this and not having, because I skimmed through the last a few pages to be like, did I miss why we call this the medicine line? Because at no point in time is there indigenous ceremony, like none, like zero. Like I did not read in here there any indigenous ceremony whatsoever. So literally this concept of the medicine line is either appropriated bullshit. Like you know how um non-indigenous have taken the term, are you in my tribe? And that's so offensive to folks like me, or at the bottom of the totem pole. And as we talked about in our last Jody Wilson Rainbow book, why that's so offensive. So I almost kind of feel like is the concept of the medicine line once again like a bunch of settler colonial bullshit. And so I'm going to have to go through all the nations, both sides, and figure out where the hell this term came from because as far as I can tell, it's a bullshit term. So I don't know. Anybody else have any thoughts about that? No. Yeah, go ahead. We're waiting for you. Go ahead.
I thought they said something about it be having to do with Sitting Bull. And once he crossed the border, that he was safe. So it was good medicine. I thought they said that in the uh, intro or something. But I agree, it has nothing to do with Indigenous lives whatsoever. And yeah, no ceremony. I think Indigenous people wouldn't draw a fucking border.
Right? Right?
So,
So I'm pretty sure the concept of a medicine line is bullshit, just in general. I think it's a bullshit concept
mm,
because like nations were split up, like the Blackfoot Confederacy. How many nations have been split up by that border? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So, and I've gone through J Treaty like more than once, so to me, that's where like I think the foundation of that might be somewhere. Maybe I could be even wrong about that. I like it might be a Blackfoot or a Mohawk elder that talked about it once. Like I don't even know. So anyway, yeah, I think that. Toboggan. Okay, I Googled it. And it's like a Mi'kmaq name, a Mi'kmaq term. And but today there's a toboggancanada.ca trademark bullshit to this day. And so I've been thinking a lot about that because it's like, well, toboggan, it's a common name in Canada only. We all know it, but I don't think Americans know it. Um, but here it's like so common. Um, but it is an indigenous name, like Canada, like Toronto, like, Saskatchewan, like I could go on, right? These are all indigenous terms to that area of wherever it is. And so I've been really struggling with the concept of Toboggan Canada and it being trademarked and no funds going to Indigenous people. Like I've been really like looping on that all day because I read this yesterday and I Googled it and so I can't quit thinking about it. So, and the other part is this is that being in the Liberal Party and we write policies and so, economic reconciliation, these are concepts that we could write a policy for. But I struggle with writing that policy because I think it would be wrong for me to like, appropriate somebody's name or anything like that, right? Like you can't take from the Mi'kmaq their name toboggan And yet Canada just did it and does it nationally, and it's like a part of the fabric of Canada in general, right? So I don't know. I've been really thinking about that. I don't know if any of you have thoughts about it, but it's just an itch I can't scratch, a scab I can't pick.
Well, I got
Oh,
lots of opinions on that.
Ken, Wendy, you
It's
don't have any?
what's that?
I just thought anybody would want to chime in, but it's just
Oh,
quiet, so I that's okay. Moving on though. Wendy, why don't you go back to the thing that you were going to talk about and the direction of the conversation that you wanted to kind of come back to?
Yeah, I think it's more so within the last month, um I have engaged with a different group of people than I normally have been learning with on anti-racism. The last, I think we're still within that period of time, but roughly the last month or so has been 40 days of engagement on anti-racism for the United Church. Um, so uh, I attend a United Church, and so spent time with others who were willing to go to sessions related to anti-racism. Um, it was really illuminating. I think it was really illuminating because I have often done that more in workplace settings where there already is an expectation that we need to unpack and learn and all the things. And so this is a more, I guess, a broader group of people, like people from lots of different life stages, but I always have much more to learn. And it kind of immersed me into conversations I just wish were happening much more, which are primarily white people talking about anti-racism. Like we need to have many, many more conversations before we get some progress. And so I'm trying to remember why I was thinking that when we were having this conversation. I think it just relates to when we were talking about, who could read this book, how would it land for you if you had been already doing a lot of work or not. I think I I think the conversations were good. I think I had lots of moments where I had to remember like to leave space for people who are very much at a place where I am not, but it took a lot of work to get out of, like just like the assumptions made about why things are the way they are and how we got to where we are. I guess I continue to find as many chances as I can to mention that reading the TRC reports is important. I continue to have not met anyone else who has done that. So I am continue to be grateful for this book club that we worked through and like they are long, but time was spent to put that information down. And so I think, it's interesting because you get to the end of your series of sessions and people were kind of questioning like, so what do we do kind of thing. And I guess I'll share with this group like the where I went with my thoughts on that is like what we need to do is what we're doing right now. Like we actually need to be talking about this a lot more. And my question to that person was really just like, in what other spaces are we ever talking about this? Like we're not. So I'm hopeful. I think it's opened some good conversation. There's just so much to do. There's
yeah.
just such a very long way to go. And Anyway, I think it also reminded me of like my hope is that everybody else's learning journey continues and then they will also explore different groups of people, different spaces um to to talk about these issues with because there's a certain amount of talking about it in a group of white people that needs to happen so that we can not do harm in all the learning that we're doing. And then there's also that layer of like, we can't only learn that way because we will just perpetuate. the perspectives that we have. So it's just been giving me just a lot to think about and reflect on. And I think one of the things when I left some moments feeling frustrated, I was also like, well, that point of view may have frustrated me, but they were showing up, like they were there. So I'm trying to see value in that. And I can, it was just a really good reminder of how much strength and dedication that Indigenous people, people of color have to engage with us at all in the learning and unlearning we need to be doing. So
Yep.
those are the reflections I wanted to share. I wasn't expecting to bring that up tonight, but I just, it's in my mind as we think about where's the rest of Canada? Why are we not further along in this?
I'm
It is,
so glad you did share it though, because that's
yeah,
the whole point though, is that
yeah,
how can we have reconciliation if we have literally the leader in a lot of this work still being like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And it's like,
Yeah.
there's like specifics for you, babes. Come
yeah.
on.
Yeah, well, it actually came up. There was
Yeah.
one moment where it actually came up, and someone used an example from some other faraway country, and they were talking about, I don't remember if it was housing or other kinds of access, but they were pointing to it and like there are countries where this is figured out, and it did kind of launch me into this world of like, yes, and Indigenous communities still do not have access to water. And we could change that.
Yeah.
That could be different right now. There wasn't a lot of speaking after that thought was shared, but I'm hoping people digested that because I think it's a hard thing to take in. It feels too big for any of them to feel like they could make a difference in, but it's also like, how are we pressuring? How are we making it not acceptable? We haven't pressured enough to do that. Yeah, so interesting.
May I also suggest reading White Women, Everything You Already Know About Your Own Racism and How to Do Better by Regina Jackson and Sarah Rao. That was at our last Settlers Book Club meeting, which ironically, only I and Siri, you all know Siri, attended. So none of the other white women from a group showed up to talk about this book.
And
But it
ironically, Siri is not white.
Exactly. Exactly. But we had a super good discussion about it.
Yeah.
It's a really great read. It's so tough on us and we need it. So yes, I highly recommend this book.
That's perfect, Kat. Like I have that copy somewhere in my house. I was hunting it down because passages from that book were like in my mind in these conversations. And absolutely agree. It's a fantastic book.
And for me, I feel like unless people have read The White Woman, Robin DiAngelo, it's like I almost feel afraid to say read, a black woman's perspective, as an Asian, an indigenous person's perspective, because kind of back to this book. And back to some of the folks you described, like we're like on their anti-racism journey. If we have folks who are the original colonizers surveying Canada, a lot of Canadians are a lot more over here than they realize. So it's like it takes a white woman for them to consider it maybe is something and maybe read a book or two and then actually learn about Indigenous people. Like it's insane to me how far this conversation has to have. But then I feel really like proud of me to be like, I have to have really strong boundaries of not including people in my freaking life anymore because they're not going to get it. And my life is coming to an end way sooner than anybody else's because of the ongoing policies and genocide that people don't want to dissect because that seems too big. And it's like, yay! I wish I could sit in discomfort of something being too big and let somebody else die at my expense. That's insane to me. But that's Canada in a nutshell, isn't it? It's so perfect to explain it that way. So I did see Carrie unmuted for one point in time. Kat, Wendy, I hope I didn't accidentally cut you off. I hope we're all on the same page. So, Carrie, I don't know if you want to chime in on something that we were talking about there.
No, I was thinking someone could tell me what the author was, but I did my own work. I Googled because it's free. And I found the book because I'd been reminded that that's another book I need to read. So yeah, here it is again reminding me.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
thank you. Other than that, yeah, I don't have anything else to
Well, I love that. I'm just gonna pause it for 1 second.
I'm just sitting here. Yeah, yeah. Just sitting and listening
Oh,
and learning
wonderful.
and
Did you
nodding.
hear
And
anything we were talking about that you wanted to chime in or have a reflection on?
just I think what I have to go back and see your names. Once I can figure out how to put my face up there, I will. I do know how to use Zoom. It was Wendy who was talking about um, just continuing to do the work and say the words and keep those conversations going, even when it seems um, uh, just too difficult. And I have to be so very careful just to hold my temper as I continue to learn and unpack, right? Because I want people to hear what I have to say, and not, be shaking my finger in their face. And in the education system, working with people who, um, man, they still have that settler mentality and etc. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that because I'm babbling now. Little babbling brook.
No, that's okay. Just
Yeah,
always glad you're here. And
yeah,
again, that's why like I encourage people who have not finished a book, who have not
yeah,
read a book, to always come to these
yeah,
conversations because there's no way just us sitting in a circle, you doing what you're doing on your side doesn't like get you thinking of anti-racism concepts,
yeah,
maybe learning a tidbit here or there about Indigenous
yeah,
people. Like it's important to just have these conversations if we can make it. But I mean, obviously, too, we have
yeah.
some good friends who just had some really bad losses in our book club. And
Mm,
yeah, so, we have lost a few of our regulars just because of loss. So,
yeah,
yeah, but we have some new
yeah.
folks here, and I'm grateful for
Mm-hmm,
all of you.
mm-hmm. And
Yeah,
this is me up close. Ooh. Oh, next time I'll next time I'll be on my computer.
that's
I don't know.
okay. It's all
Lost track of
good. Just
time.
glad you
Yeah, yeah,
came and
yeah,
chimed in. So thank you,
yeah.
Deb.
No, thank you guys. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. Okay.
Well, folks, we might be wrapping up a little earlier today just because there's a fewer of us and the book was so incredibly terribly boring. But I did want to invite Carrie because Carrie, didn't you just finish the book twice even? Did you want to talk about that? You're welcome to talk about any book on the at book club for sure.
Yeah, I love that book. Our last book that we did, the forgive me, I have brain injury and I long short-term memory loss. So
I was a teenage slasher by Stephen
yeah,
Graham Jones,
yeah.
Doctor.
Um, and I attribute, I'm learning that, you know, it's okay to not get things the way I used to get them, or where I think I should or supposed to get them. So I'm learning to allow myself that, I need to read the book 3 times. I'm going to read the book 3 times. But I was captivated by um, how he delivered the book in such a way. Oh, it's even hard to explain. Like from the young guy's perspective, but it was it's such a different way that I've ever read. Um, so I read it twice and I just loved it. Um, like he explained what slashers are, like they're a real thing. And like, of course, you know, and the fact that he has um allergy to peanut butter, it cracked me right up, and being a slasher. So there was some idea that maybe, you know, if he got rid of, or if he dealt with his um peanut allergy, he wouldn't be a slasher anymore. And I don't know. I just thought it was great. I really did. Um, yeah. And just the teenage difficulty. In the end, it was like, yeah, yeah. I don't know. Like, there's nothing specific. I just really liked it. Yeah. I don't know if anybody else read it or not.
Oh, we sure did. And tomorrow the
Okay.
podcast is going to come out. It should have came out today, but I'd forgotten to triple check and send it to
Right.
Darcy. So unfortunately, that's my fault. It didn't get published today or on Sunday for that matter, but it will be published tomorrow. So you
Cool.
can hear all of our thoughts on that one for sure. And yeah, if that, you want to do a review, and I just want to say this about Native artists, which he is. Um,
Mhm.
so Native authors are typically given very bad reviews, and especially by racists, because
Yeah.
racists are committed to not understanding and being racist. So, if non-Indigenous people can give positive reviews of a book,
Mhm.
especially of a, Black author, Indigenous author, person of color in any capacity, that helps other people, know that, Dallas Brody is just writing a review to be a dick, not because they genuinely read the book or care about the person who wrote it, right? So,
Or
uh,
care about, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this, I'm so passionate about this, and he is one of my favorite authors of all time.
yes.
And don't care to understand different narratives from different cultures. Like, not everything is in a straight line, beginning, middle, and end. Like, anyway, carry on. Sorry.
If anyone can interrupt me anytime to
Okay.
tell me why
Oh,
they
well,
love
and that, no.
Stephen Graham Jones more than I
Right?
do, because I'm not his wife, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Him and Adam Beach are in my top five. I
Yeah.
don't know what to say. This
Right.
is being recorded too, so
Yeah.
we'll see
Well,
if people made it to the end.
and he was in Calgary, and I didn't go to that fest. I was going to, and anyway, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he's
No, so I do recommend, if you do love an author or the book, please write a
yeah,
positive review in your
yeah,
world online
yeah.
so that we leave some sort of
Yeah.
positivity. And like I think it really matters to authors. Like I've met
Mhm.
quite a few now, and they're just incredible human beings that are in their own world, making wonderful fiction or
Mhm.
nonfiction for us so that we can enjoy our lives. And I'm just so grateful for authors like that. Yeah, go ahead, Carrie.
I just remembered um the lead character, he cut off her braids. Did you catch that in the book?
I'm trying to remember the
And
context of
he
that. Yeah.
just so, and I believe he was in his slasher mode. And yeah, and he didn't want, because in the slasher movies they have the it girl always in
Mhm.
a slasher movie, and he didn't want her to be the it girl, so he was trying to make it other girls, but it was her. And yeah, cut off her braids, jerk, whatever. But before I shut up, if Kat could give me that information for the white woman thing in the chat, that'd be great, and I'll try and make that work.
Yeah, and the Settler Book Club too. And
Yeah.
Kat was kind enough to give me kind of the draft for her next year. And so I'm going to try to kind of duplicate some of the books that I wanted to do or that I already have a copy of on the same month, so that way, if people read that book and they can't make mine or they can't make hers, they have an opportunity. I think that's really important because I think most people, it's just timing, right? Like, um, there's so many reasons not to go to a book club, quite frankly. But if we can accommodate it in some way, then we will. So, and that Kat has that in there. And can you also put the settlerbookclub.com, because I want to make sure that everybody signs up to both, or has the opportunity to, look through the timeline and see if that is something that they've already read. Like, I always encourage people who have already read a book to join the book club, if just to help discuss it with everybody. And yeah, go ahead, Kat.
Do you happen to have your list for next year? I am curious. Okay, no worries. I know you've had a lot going on, so
Yeah, no, but don't hesitate to publish yours when you're ready, and
yeah.
then I'll just go from there. So, yeah, that I always hope to have it done sooner, but AHS, two massive surgeries had to be right freaking now in my life, of
I
course. So,
know.
yeah, not much I can do about that. Anywho, well, thanks everybody for chiming in and for coming tonight. All of you are appreciated, and all of those who are listening later are appreciated. So, um, don't hesitate to come join our next one. So, our next one is Remembering Our Relations. And this is the Denne's Oral Histories of Wood Buffalo National Park, the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation, with they're the authors along with two others here. So this is a book I've been so excited to read for so long, and yeah, we're gonna do that one to finish off our year, and then hopefully I will be putting out another link here for next year with some of the ones that we're thinking of. And I'm going to have Bob Joseph on my podcast this week to talk about his second book, about reconciling. So I was going to try to do The Lesser Blessed by Richard Van Camp on January, but I haven't got that book yet. So I don't want to do that quite yet, but I have Bob Joseph's other book. So I think I'm going to do that book as our January book club for anybody who may have that book, who is interested in that book. We'll start there. And then that way, I'll give a new link out as soon as I sit down and get all that done. And hopefully, yeah, hopefully others will come. And Wendy, don't hesitate to tell your crew about Kat's book club or my book club, in the hopes that maybe they'll, see that as part of their whatever challenge they're doing, and continue to do that good work. Because yeah, it's frustrating because I want to meet people where they're at, but I know I don't have the time and patience for people that are still that far on their journey. I know I don't. Um, but at the same time, I do want to be with people who legitimately want to be here. So, and that's who's here, and I'm grateful to be here with you all. And we're coming up on 10 years of this book club. Actually, in June will be our 10-year anniversary. So, yeah. Yeah, and I think our third book was Mongrels by Stephen Graham Jones. So, and that's where I first fell in love with that man. And the more I learned, and the more I seen him, and the more I listened to him, I'm like, yeah, that's my cup of tea. Deb's like, pray, pray. Oh my goodness. Well, thanks folks for
Do you have
coming.
that on record?
What's that? Go ahead.
Record it?
Yeah, we're still recording.
Yeah. I know you're trying to go. David A. Robertson is a Cree author from Seattle. He's another favorite, and I'm a retired school librarian. And
okay, but I just want to show you, this is his book that I want to read. So this might be February.
I have that one about anxiety.
Yeah. I really want to read this book. It's ironic. I have never read one of his books, even though he's like him and Richard Van Camp.
Oh,
I just
Richard
read
Van Camp
Beast.
is so good too.
Yeah. And it's for kids, it's for teens, but it's so fun. Oh my God, it's so fun.
And I think I probably read, because that is who I worked with. And of course, I was a librarian in Alberta, and I had to go on medical leave. So I'm finding a way to work my way back in. But I'm telling you, I would have had a secret stash of books that students could come and get from me, because there was no way I was taking those titles off my shelves. Yeah. Like, anyway, that's a whole other.
But Deb, I have never read The Lesser Blessed. And that's his like breakthrough like novel of 30 years ago or something. And I've never read it actually.
Yeah. So many good books out there. And, you know, and again, with the publishing, it's not, boy, we talked a good game. What was it, 10 years ago? And it's all about and publishing's gone right back to where we were.
Mm.
Um,
I've had a few folks trying to encourage me to write a book,
oh, yeah.
including Pam, you know, to talk about my podcast. And
Mhm.
I think that's such a great idea. So I might have to do that, but I
In your
also
spare
am,
time?
yes, kind of scared to do that. So
But
anyway,
yeah,
anyway,
it's a
okay,
good
well,
voice to add to what's out there.
yeah, for sure.
Mhm. All
All
righty.
right, folks. All right, thanks for
Bye.
joining us, and I hope to see you at next book club too.
Yep.